Good evening, everyone. This is John Heidel, and this is our monthly meeting for the El Dorado Hills Community Council. And I would like to start by opening up the meeting, calling the meeting to order. And so with that, we always go around and introduce members of our leadership team who are present and what their basic roles are so that there's knowledge for any new participants as to who to contact if some particular item comes up of interest in tonight's discussion. So with that, I'm going to start over here with Mr. Vania, and then we'll just kind of work around the room. So,
yes, John Vania, I'm the infrastructure head.
Looks like your microphone may not be on. Okay.
You're live. Great. Sorry about that. John Vania, infrastructure head, District 1 Planning Commissioner.
Another John Davey. I'm the chair of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee. Resident group of volunteers that reviews proposed development in El Dorado Hills and provides feedback to the applicants, the planning process, board supervisors, the planning commission. On to another John.
Very good. And I'm John Heidel. I've introduced myself, so to speak, already. So over to Chief Lilly.
Yep, Michael Anthel, Deputy Chief with El Dorado Hills Fire Department. I chair the Public Safety Committee. My main objective is to try and connect any public concerns that relate to public safety with either CHP or the appropriate law enforcement or fire agencies.
Very good. And so Richard Ross joined us as well. So Richard, just introduce yourself in terms of what your role is.
Richard Ross, good governance, observing and commenting on how well government works, or sometimes how it doesn't work.
Okay, very good. We are missing Cindy Munt, my assistant. She is on vacation this week, so she will not be participating. And I also know that Angie Platt, who represents our Healthy Communities, is not able to attend this evening. So those will be our two members who are absent. And so with that, I'd like to also recognize volunteer District 1 commissioners and committee members who are present. So Tita, if you, and if you can come up to is there a microphone back there where you are somewhere?
I'm right here in front.
Okay. You just need to either have you come to the microphone or grab one of those so you can introduce yourself and people can hear you properly.
Tita Bladen, El Dorado County Commission on Aging, and I'm a commissioner.
Thank you. And we also have Wendy Mae Davis, who's online. Can you open that? I don't know if you need to promote her to a panelist or, okay.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, Wendy Mae, your District 1 Commissioner for the County Tax Assessor Appeals Board. Pretty simple. If you don't agree with how the county has assessed your property taxes, we help that situation come to amends for both parties to be happy.
Thank you, Wendy Mae. Appreciate that. I don't see any other commissioners or committee members. So I'm going to move on to number 2, adoption of the agenda. Does anyone on the leadership team have any proposed changes or comments on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, then we're going to go ahead and accept the agenda as submitted. Number 3, public comment. And this is the portion of the meeting that we want to give any member of the public the opportunity to come forward and speak. We would ask that you either speak into a microphone or one of the portable mics that are being distributed around so that everyone who's participating via the internet can go ahead and hear your comments. And we ask that you limit your comments to items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if we've got something that's already agendized, please hold your comments until we get to that. But this would be the portion of time for any questions or comments outside of the agenda that anyone would like to present. So with that, let's start with the I won't say boardroom because it is a boardroom in part, but the conference room. Does anybody in the room here have any public comments they'd like to make at this point? Okay, seeing none. If there's anybody who's an attendee who would like to make a comment under the public comment period, please raise your hand. Okay, and I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I will accept public comment as none for this evening. And that moves us down to our next item, which is our guest speaker. And I'm pleased to introduce Frank Porter, who's representing Housing El Dorado. Frank and I have known each other for a long time since we live in the same residential community and have for probably 30-something years. So our history together working on different things goes back a long time. But I know Frank has been very active in Housing El Dorado. And when we get to the point of talking about supervisor communications, you'll understand the connection here because it ties to the El Dorado Opportunity Knox Continuum of Care, homeless strategic plan, particularly the stuff that they have with the sheltering that's going on in Placerville. There is a direct link to the EDOC COC. But I invited Frank to go ahead and share any number of things in terms of what they're doing. And I think we have a PowerPoint presentation. So if you'd like to do a little bit more on the self-intro, please do, Frank.
And do that right now. It's right here. Let me get that thing live on the screen. On this one, that's forward and that's back. Let me get this.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. And I appreciate, we get us set up yet?
There we go. How's that?
Okay. First of all, thanks very much for the invitation. Again, I'm Frank Ford. I'm actually, John and I think it's more like 35 years.
Probably, yeah.
The Lake Hills Civic Association, when I first moved out to Lake Hills, where John and I live, was affectionately known as Leak Hills because our water system, which we owned ourselves, was leaking like a sieve. And one of the first civic things I got involved with John was the conversion of that over to EID, which in this hindsight was a great move for our little neighborhood. And the leaks went away. So, and as you know, John has been involved in all sorts of community stuff his whole career. I had a big career in school administration as a school superintendent, and I always joked I slept in El Dorado County for 35 years, and I worked in other counties. But I've since been retired about 6 years, and this Housing El Dorado and the homeless situation, housing, affordable housing, has become my project in my retirement. I'm pretty much doing it mostly full time. And I'm doing it with a lot of other folks. A lot of good work is going on, and I welcome the opportunity to share some of that with you. I just kind of update you on what we're doing as Housing El Dorado in cooperation with all sorts of other nonprofits and organizations and government agencies. Housing El Dorado was formed about 14 months ago. We have three functions, basically: service, education, and advocacy. And we are sort of we fill in gaps in the homeless and affordable housing sphere on the west slope of El Dorado County, much like the Homeless Coalition up in Tahoe does up in Tahoe. Is this gonna work?
Oh, it should. I'm over here. If it doesn't, I'll do it if you don't.
Why don't you just do the next one, next slide? Okay. If it works.
I will.
This is our mission. I'll skip through that. Next slide. We are a 50c3 nonprofit. We are formed under the El Dorado Community Foundation is providing our umbrella, and they have provided us with organizational development support, fundraising assistance, and fiscal management in our launch. So next slide. We pulled together the work that was being done by basically 4 other organizations. One was not pulled together, but worked together with 4 other organizations. The Interfaith Nomadic Shelter, which has been providing temporary winter shelter for the last 10 years on the West Slope. That's a collection of churches, faith-based groups, who've been providing temporary winter shelter all the way up until the winter of 2020, when COVID meant that they had a really difficult time meeting COVID restrictions and being able to provide services and so on. And that really was a trigger for us to get formed, because there was absolutely no winter lodging, would have been none in 2020 or in 2021, 22, but for the work that we were able to pull together. It also builds on the work of the Upper Dining Room, is a very strong partner of ours. You may recognize them. The community Hangtown Haven Campground, several of our board members worked on that project many years ago, and also now have joined our board. The Western Slope Coalition of Affordable Housing also merged with us. And then we've also been helping and tying together our work with Project Room Key up at the Best Western Motel. So next slide. Just to sort of give you a little snapshot of what our homeless population looks like. Every 2 years by law, each jurisdiction goes through what's called a point in time count, or PIT count for short. And the PIT count just happened actually about 2 weeks ago in our county on the 23rd and 24th of February. And it happened in jurisdictions around the country, around the state, on those same, right about the same time period. And it's meant to give you a snapshot, every jurisdiction across the country, of what your population, it's a little bit of a census, if you will, of the homeless population in your jurisdiction. In this case, El Dorado County. It's done every 2 years now. It was not done in 2021, was supposed to because of COVID. They postponed it for a year. So it happened this past February of 2022. We don't have the newest data yet. We won't have it for several more weeks. There's a whole auditing process that has to go through to compile it and so on. What we do have is our last count was in 2019. And the numbers are up there for you to see. The important thing to keep in mind about the PIT count, remember, it's intentionally done in the dead of winter across the country by law, because that's the time when the absolute count will be absolutely lowest. Why? Because it's in the dead of winter. And if you're a homeless person in the dead of winter and you have any options for any kind of shelter, you're going to find it, right? You're going to go and be there. So we do a point in time count nationally. Really, it gives you a low end number. And everybody who's studied this issue and worked on homelessness over the years knows and understands that the PIT count number is intentionally really low, but it gives you a constant point in time, fixed point to kind of measure how you're doing. So the other thing to keep in mind in our county, there's a program called McKinley-Vento, which is homeless services for homeless students. That is, they collect data on and provide services to homeless students, and their counting criteria is a little different. But it is basically if you're unhoused, meaning if you're living in a motel, that's not considered housing, permanent housing. If you're living, there's a broader definition of what unhoused is than the PIT count. So there are about 750 children in our county who are considered unhoused, which as a former school superintendent is unacceptable to me, period. And I won't go into why that is, but next slide. This gives you a little historical trend line on the PIT count in our county. And you can see how it's gone up quite a bit, 2017. And then this was the most recent audited data. And you can see also this line here is the brown line is unsheltered homeless. So this is sheltered homeless are down here. So next slide. The other thing is to keep in mind is that sometimes people want to know, well, how long have people been experiencing, when you're a homeless person, experiencing homelessness in our county? And as you can see, and how long have they lived in El Dorado County? And as you can see, 47% of them have lived here in the last count their entire lives. So that means they are not, we don't have people coming to El Dorado County. There's a myth about this, coming to El Dorado County to be homeless. They live here, they become homeless for all sorts of reasons, a whole range of them. And you can see you've got over, 68, 70%, right? Are either 5 to 10 years or their entire life. So they are our residents who have fallen into homelessness by and large. Next slide. This also gives a comparison about where most of them are. And not surprisingly, you can see about 20% of them are in South Lake Tahoe and about 80% in the west slope. And this is it.
Is that proportionate to the general populations in both those areas, are 20%?
Yes, it is pretty much. It's a little yeah, it's pretty close actually. Yeah, in round numbers, yeah, it's pretty proportionate. Yep. And this is by gender over here, and you can see again more men, but also women are homeless. A lot of single women or women with children are, and as you saw the numbers for the homeless students, that correlates with that as well. This is for adults. So next slide. This is sort of a living situation. This gives you a little snapshot of how what the living situation is for the homeless. And you can see And this is based on HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, which is this state system for tracking that we use in our county as well. It's a management information system where data is inputted on homeless folks that we help to provide delivery and services with and so on, and track where they are, what their needs are. But a third of them are living outside, 22% are car camping, and 17% couch surfing, which means they're staying with friends and relatives, you know, just kind of surfing, and then some in motels and so on. And you can see how it dwindles off. But again, a big portion of them just living out in the woods. And so when I did the point count, by the way, the 23rd of February, and we found homeless that we interviewed out in the woods, even after it had snowed the night before. So next slide. There's a correlated problem here in our county. We have a homeless problem. We also have an enormous shortfall in affordable housing in our county and across the state. And our county, as you know, has experienced just in the last 3 years an enormous spike in home prices and rental rates, and also a really low vacancy rate. The last realtor I talked to said it's about 3% for our county, which is basically zero, effectively. So we have very, very few rentals available, low inventory of housing, and prices way up. And even before that, now remember, this data, by the way, is from 2019. So this is housing element data about what our shortfall of affordable housing was. Now, just remember what's happened in the last 3 years to affordable housing. So these numbers I'm showing you are, in my estimation, I mean, you know, are lower than the reality of this movement. That our county needs about 3,900 more affordable housing units. And actually it was about 3,000, and then the Calder fire happened, and it added another nearly 800 residences, most of whom fell in that affordable or low income range, and they are gone. This is really scary. 76% of extra low income families in our county are paying 50% of their income on housing. That has enormously negative effects on their ability to just put food on the table, pay for, you know, other costs. Typical, the guideline at the federal and state level is you should not be spending more than 30% of your income on housing. And then the other one is the current rental rates for housing in our county. You need to be earning $34 an hour, working 40 hours a week, to afford the average rent cost of a 2-bedroom apartment, which is now $1,700. So you have to think about, let's go to the next slide. This kind of gives you a scan of on the housing element. This is, as John well knows, that I've been spending a lot of time on the housing element of the county, because that is the key building block for how we're going to accelerate the development of affordable housing in our county. This was part of their analysis. This is from one of the slides at a board presentation about 6 months ago. But you can see we have a huge shortfall for very low income folks. And for those, now what this means, median income, that means you're making less than 50% of median income. We have about that many, 1,300 are needed in the entire unincorporated county. This is Tahoe Basin. And so on the total number here, 4,994 includes what are called moderate income homes, which are 120% or less than median. Which again, if you go to the next slide, this kind of gives you a picture of who typical, extremely low income. These are the kinds of jobs that are food service workers, clerks, manicurists, home care aides. Very low income includes these kind of workers, and low income includes those workers listed up there. And the fundamental problem, and you talk to employers, and I've spent, John, of course, sponsored a really nice forum with the business park owners about 2 years ago. And we heard testimony directly from them telling us how difficult it is for them to grow their businesses because they simply can't attract and retain employees to staff their businesses. And I've gone and talked to some of the business owners of the business part. And there's a very fundamental basic problem for our economy in our county is that we're hurting ourselves from an economic development standpoint by not really addressing this aggressively and getting it solved, because these people are either unhoused or they're traveling outside of our county to live, worsening our transportation traffic problem. And we're not, you know, they work in our stores and our preschool centers and so on and so forth, and we don't have housing they can afford. Next slide. Now there are some successes, and that is that progress is being made. A lot of it is still on paper, unfortunately. I mean, there are projects that have been gone through the planning process, have gotten approvals, are working on the last design details and getting funding lined up, but they're slowly coming online. The key is, in my view, we have to accelerate them. Why? Because we're losing, you know, I talked to another gentleman that owns some property up in El Dorado, and he said to me, I'm losing, my children are moving out of the area, out of this county where they grew up, because they can't afford to buy a house here to get started on their housing. And so we are fundamentally sort of killing off our economy and our future. We also have a problem with we will have a problem increasingly with our schools, because people who have school-age children are going to be less and less able to live here. Why? Because again, the housing is so expensive. But the good news is there's a Placerville Armory, a Jamboree housing, affordable housing developer is coming in and going to be building 82 units there. El Dorado Haven, Mercy Housing is building 65 units over on Plaza Valley Road. There's Mallard Apartments in Placerville and Middletown Road Apartments. There's another project going in Cameron Park I just learned about recently. There will be 190 units. There are other projects in the works. Part of our role as Housing El Dorado has been, to be honest with you, to go out and encourage affordable housing developers to come to our county. Because here's another fundamental problem in our county. We have a terrible reputation with developers. Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. They are, many of them, not real eager to do business in El Dorado County, because the planning process can be so fraught with pitfalls and shortfalls and delays. And so a fundamental problem is encouraging these people to come in and help work on this problem with us. Next slide. Now, the service part of what Housing El Dorado is doing is the Pathways project. So this is our winter lodging project. Next slide. And this is relies heavily on the interfaith collaboration, the Foothills Interfaith Collaboration, which is about 8 churches on the West Slope. They're listed up here. 4 of them were able to offer facilities this winter, 1 night a week for 3.5 months. And then fortunately, the city of Placerville also offered a facility on Main Street for 3 nights a week. So we've been able, starting we were able to accelerate our launch date. You remember that enormous winter storm we got in December? Well, we were due to open on January 1. We got contacted by the city, and they offered up this facility if we could start a week earlier. So we scrambled and launched a week earlier. We got the call from the city on the 23rd of December, and on the 26th we launched early. So we had to hire staff. I won't go through all the stuff that had to go on to get the benefit. Anyway, we've launched it. The other blessing is that we were also able to get some support from the County Board of Supervisors to help offset the costs of doing this, because we needed to hire some staff, temporary seasonal staff, and their transportation costs and so on. But we're very grateful for the help of all of these churches. The church volunteers are at the heart and soul of what we're doing, and they provide food and volunteer help, and in some cases, housing. The Pathways shelter, we house anywhere from 10 to 17 a night. We have about 80% men, 20% women. They're age 22 to 65. That's the age range. We have seniors, veterans, disabled, former foster youth, some chronically ill. We have 2 of our beds are reserved each night for the sheriffs, one for the sheriff and one for Marshall Hospital, so that if they're in a bind and they are, they have been at peak load for different reasons, and they need to release somebody in the evening, we have a space for them to at least provide some overnight shelter for a couple of nights as needed. And we do what are called low-barrier housing first admissions. We require everyone to be COVID vaccinated. One, because our volunteers and churches require it and stipulate that. And 2, it's the right, safe thing to do. So we've had run, if you go on next slide, we've run a couple of vaccine clinics, 3 of them up at the upper room to help the general homeless population, but particularly any that are at our winter lodging facility to get vaccinated. The upper room provides pickup. They also provide dinner meals. The food bank of El Dorado County has been providing snacks and beverages. Job Shelter of Sierras has provided toiletries and clothing. And the area churches, again, volunteers, snacks, and financing. And the county health department has been just really a wonderful partner and helped us, meet the COVID strict requirements. Next slide. This is sort of the other part of what we do as a service organization is to provide navigation services. So the key for helping homeless folks is to move them from being unhoused and on the street into some permanent housing. So we have people who live in our shelter, our temporary overnight winter shelter, who have jobs during the day, and then they stay with us at night because they're trying to earn just enough money to get back into some kind of house situation. We also have people that are in need of help with getting they've lost their driver's license, so they need a new ID, or we can help them get into an addiction treatment program. So we provide those kind of navigation services, help get them from unhoused into permanent housing. And we have some successes. We also have a lot of, it's difficult work. The homeless are, it's not an easy thing to solve. I put this quote on the bottom because it's from a good friend of mine. And he told me, if you give me the perfect homeless person, I'll give you the perfect solution. And the reality is homeless folks, just like all of us, are the whole spectrum of the whole bundle of humanity, right? They come to us the way they are. And in some cases, they may have economic issues, they may have drug addiction issues, they may have alcohol issues, they may have mental health issues, or they may just have had a lot of bad luck and a lot of medical issues that have just compounded and gotten to the point where they're now out on the street. Now, I'm going to tell you something that really worries the heck out of me and should worry all of us, is that many of the COVID eviction restrictions are going to end at the end of this month. So that means that a lot of landlords throughout the state will be in a position where they are not bound by those restrictions about evicting clients. Now, there is assistance available for some of them. We are very worried. I am very worried. I think we all should be, that we're going to see a lot of evictions rolling out over the next 6 or 8 months. It's going to take a bad situation and make it even worse. So anyway, next slide. We follow strict COVID protocols. We had to submit with the county health department a COVID plan for both the winter lodging program we ran last winter, the 2021 one, and this 21-22 winter. And I kind of went over this before. Next slide. Our plans for 2022, we see a really key need. In fact, the county, John just talked a little about the comprehensive plan for preventing and ending homelessness in our county that has just been issued by the Continuing Care Board, EDOC. One of the main recommendations there, and we completely concur because we see the need for, is a permanent. We are one of the only 4 counties in the state that does not have a permanent year-round emergency shelter / navigation center. And the reason that's important is For the homeless, it's a little like, I've heard it likened to an emergency room at a hospital. When you have a medical problem that you can't go anywhere, I'm desperate, what am I going to do? Where do you go? You go to the emergency room, and they sort out, give you triage, they figure out what's going on, they help you get settled, they give you some diagnosis, and you're on your way. And maybe you go to another hospital for treatment, or you go somewhere else for this care. Well, an emergency center for the shelter first serves the same function. There are lots of services in our county, and I found, as John probably has, many of you have, is they're somewhat fragmented. People don't know about them, or they can't get to them because they're homeless, they don't have a car, or they don't have a driver's license or whatever. And so you need to have some place where law enforcement and the hospitals can bring them to help get them settled and give them maybe some temporary overnight lodging for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it takes. They're not going to live there full time, but they're going to transition. And every county but 4 in the state has one of these, and we don't. It's not something we should be proud of, in my opinion. It is a severe lack of service and a severe missing link in our services for the homeless and our ability to really respond effectively. Because currently the winter lodging that we're offering is just temporary. I mean, it's better than having people freeze out in the cold, obviously. And we get some successes, but nothing like you get with an emergency shelter. So we find that this is the first bullet for a reason. The second bullet is we continue to advocate for more affordable housing, transitional housing across the board. Because even if we build an emergency shelter, we're still not going to meet the need. We're still going to have more demand. And then the other one is sustain and grow relationships with affordable housing developers, because they, again, can bring a lot of expertise to us. They can help us bring funding to our county to help address the problem. They can also expedite getting these projects up and going more quickly. Next slide. We're going to continue. We have a day navigation and shower program that we run in cooperation with the Upper Room, and Green Valley Church, where we transport the homeless from the Upper Room. We provide navigation services, and we take them down to Green Valley that has a very nice shower facility and gym, and they're very generous about offering that and working with us on that. So that's a little adjunct service that we're providing. We may be doing some other day navigation. And again, this is all sort of backfill work as other agencies come online and other nonprofits come online. We're ready to step back and turn it over to other folks. We also want to, this is another big item. We are working with the Eldorado Community Foundation on establishing a land bank and land trust on the West Slope. South Lake Tahoe established what's called the St. Joseph's Land Trust about 10 years ago up in Tahoe Basin. Why? Because they confronted this problem earlier than we did. And why is that? Well, because first of all, it's Tahoe in the winter with snow and homeless. Kind of picture that one. The second and even bigger reason is their economy up there is heavily dependent on hospitality workers. Many of them fairly low wage or medium low wage. And they were having a real crisis with being able to find workers to come and live there because they simply didn't have the housing. And that happened much earlier in South Lake Tahoe. And so they're further ahead than we are in dealing with this. They are just breaking ground this year on a 290 unit sugar pine village. Part of the project depended on a land trust that got the land donated by another agency, and then worked with developers to put together a project for sustainable, permanent, affordable housing. So we're working on something similar on the West Slope. More news to come about that, because we think in the long term, we're going to have, if we're going to hit 3,900 units of affordable housing, we have to scale up on a lot of different levels to get it there. The other one is to keep relationships going with our community partners. We work with Only Kindness, with Upper Room, with Jobs Shelters, with the Western Slope Interfaith Collaboration, and county and city staff to try and help fill gaps and move things ahead. And that last button, this is here for a reason at the very end. We really would like to get out of the temporary winter shelter business, to be honest with you. I mean, we will do it and we can do it. We demonstrated that, but we don't think it's really the solution. We think, again, it's just a Band-Aid, a temporary kind of interim solution. Next slide. In summary, you know, we are really encouraged. There is a lot of, when I started looking at this 2 years ago and working on this, and we started, you know, assessing, looking at what's going on the West Slope, there are a lot of wonderful nonprofits and church groups that have been doing a lot of good work. The problem is it's kind of been patchwork and you know, trying to make do, which is a credit to our spirit in El Dorado County of just making do, I know. But it's kind of time to move our game up to another level in our view. We have a very skilled, passionate team. We are all unpaid board members. We are a working board. We have 8 members on our board, and we have about 12 more that work on various committees. All of us work. We are workers. We don't have an executive director, but we have a very dedicated group. We've demonstrated our capacity to deliver services, and we are again partnering with county and the city of Placerville for a unified approach to housing-related initiatives. And with that, we are also seeking, if you are, you know, at all interested or inspired maybe even to get involved, we are looking for volunteers in social media, grant writing, event planning, and property development, because we see a long-term need to just do all of those things and keep them going for probably quite a few years. We do have plans to eventually hire a part-time executive director, executive assistant once we get to a certain level. You know, I don't know how much longer I can keep working full-time. My wife might not give me permission for another 2 years, but we'll see. Next slide, that's it. And with that, I can take questions.
Let's start with the leadership team. Anyone, leadership team, have any questions or comments for Frank?
I think you're mentioning trying to build a permanent shelter in the county. Is there a site picked out and momentum on that, or is it just concept, you know, right now, just something you're thinking
Good
about?
question. The question is, I don't know if the question is there, you're seeing the need for a permanent shelter. Is there a site picked out? At this point, the county has a team of staff or folks on staff looking at various properties. I don't know. I honestly do not know what they are. That's something they're doing. But they are searching for various sites. The county board, and maybe John can speak to this about the timeline the board gave them at your recent board meeting on the 22nd of February. Maybe that's better for you to do that.
Yeah, so we asked staff, and it's primarily facilities that would go out and look at what's available, working with Health and Human Services to define opportunities, put in a shelter. And they had been asked to do that before and went out and did a preliminary. Now we're saying we need to find something that's suitable, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the time frame was May, if I remember right, that they're supposed to come back. But I expect to get something back next month, at least an initial read on these are the 3 properties that look most possible. And they would probably start out with a lease or rent type of agreement, nothing long-term. But location is a critical factor part of it, because it's not only does it fit within the community's concerns, right? Because you got residential housing, et cetera, but does it meet the business community's concerns as well? And so, and then is it accessible readily for services, the navigations? So it really comes down to a unique set of qualifying properties, probably, that you can meet all those things and say, yeah, this satisfies the fundamental things of location. The bottom line is there is no selected location, and there's a lot of different organizations looking, including the upper room is looking at an independent thing that they might be able to do. So just a lot of work from the EDOC COC to try to find what is that best location. Recognize it's not just one. You have to start somewhere, and then you have to be able to grow to deal with the community-based aspects of it. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with Tahoe, because they've had a nonprofit for 8 years, I think now, that have taken the lead in that. And that's the reason it happened, in my opinion, in Tahoe, is it wasn't driven by the city government. City of South Lake Tahoe has nothing to do that. The county has nothing to do that. It's a nonprofit like Housing El Dorado that championed all of that and got it going, including an operations home key opportunity to purchase with state monies and stuff. So there's a lot of history to it, but the bottom line is we're still in that master search. If you have a piece of property you'd like to bring to our attention, I'd be glad to know where it is. But we're pretty much centering around looking at primarily Placerville, because that's where our biggest West Slope homeless population is. That's where the county services are. So we would probably ideally start with something in Placerville, but that doesn't mean it would be limited to Placerville.
Right, it looks like you guys do a lot of work. It's a complex problem, multiple layers to it.
It is
a lot of energy at it.
Yeah, we're throwing a lot of energy at it. We're making some headway. I really think we are. It's just slow and sometimes frustrating because I think we get a couple of steps forward and then we take a step or so backwards, but we're hanging in there. And I'm optimistic that this push for a permanent shelter may actually yield some results. Hopefully before next. The other thing pressing this is the fire risk. And I'll be honest with you, the other key factor that's pushing the need for a permanent homeless shelter is the fact that we've had several fires last season that started at homeless camps. And it scared the bejesus out of understandably, the fire department, particularly up in Placerville area and other areas. And so there's a real tangible fire threat here. There's also the issue of, the humanity of having people freezing to death outside. We've had people who have gangrene and have amputations this winter, by the way, on the West Slope because they've been out in the cold and they had no other alternatives. So, in my view, that's unacceptable. And it should be unacceptable for any citizen. And I'll argue that with you anytime. And so we need to move forward with our game, step our game up and get this done. Because the money is there. State money, the other funding is there. State funding is there to do this.
State and federal, both.
State and federal money, there's local money. There's the resources to do it. It's a matter of finding the location and finding it in a spot where the community says, yeah, that makes the best sense. And I think we can do that. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, good question, Frank. You hear a lot in various media sources in respect to the makeup of the homeless community, that a lot of it is associated, as a result of drugs or mental illness. So based on your data collection and stuff, what do you find the percentages to be of those type of factors?
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, you find me the perfect homeless person, I'll find you the perfect solution. And it's yes, the homeless folks have a whole range of reasons they're homeless. Some of them have fallen into homelessness because of economic crisis. They got in an accident, they had a health issue, they lost a family member, somebody lost their job, and they got evicted and they couldn't get together enough rent to get back in the house. And then it creates this downward spiral. And if they had a alcohol or drug problem before that happened, it tends to get what? The longer they're in homelessness, the worse it gets. And so that's why, again, having an emergency shelter, you can catch some of this and prevent the downward spiral.
Does that take a lot? Is that a major component, drugs and alcohol and mental illness? Or, what are the basic percentages do you see in that?
I would say, a good percentage of, I'm going to not hazard too much of a percentage, but I would say a very good majority of them have drug and alcohol or alcohol problems. That some of them have mental health issues, again, on a whole spectrum, just like you'd find in our general population, by the way. And, there are housed people with mental health issues. There are housed people with drug issues, and there are unhoused people. The unhoused people have a harder time getting over it. Why? Because they're living in the dirt. And
the second part of my question is, and I don't understand the mentality, but I hear also that a lot of people who are homeless like being homeless and want to stay being homeless. And so, it's all fine and dandy. You want to have these, it's one thing for the winter when it's cold. Yeah, it's going to motivate a lot of people to get indoors to stay warm. But, how much of them, which I don't understand because I like having a home. But, I hear that a lot of people like being homeless. Yeah. So,
well, our problem in our county is we just don't have, you talk, Only Kindness is the organization that handles rapid rehousing in our county. Great organization, and they go about the work of getting people into housing. And they tell me over and over again, our central problem is, Frank, we don't have housing to put people in, period. And so even if I can come up with some interventions, we have very limited options because we've allowed ourselves to get so far behind on the affordable housing part of it. We've also allowed ourselves to not have even an emergency shelter to sort of temporarily bridge it. And so to answer your question, I think that there are folks that they have a community. The other thing you'll find is the homeless eventually have a community out in the woods. They create these camps because why? They want to have a little safety, a little security, a little bit of a community. So they create these encampments. And you go out, I've been out and walked through them, you'll find these encampments. And so what we're doing is we're allowing that to grow instead of peeling off the many who want to get back into housing, who want to re-enter a housing state, because we don't have any options available for them.
So would you say that's a majority of the people do want to go into homes? Or I mean, have they asked those type of questions?
I don't know if I'd venture a number on that, but you are absolutely right. There are some that get into the life, it becomes a life pattern. They are in an encampment. They like that.
So let me help with this. The strategic plan has all the numbers you're asking for.
Yeah.
Let me give you the numbers, okay? The number of homeless out of the 613 in 2019, 88 reported having a substance use disorder, and 127 said they're severely mentally ill. So that combination is 200 of 613.
About a third.
1/3.
Yep.
Are in that category. It's not 60% of what some people would like you to believe.
I didn't throw out any numbers. I was just wondering what those numbers
I'm hearing
are.
in social media and stuff, and numbers the use here in a lot of cases are not accurate. These are numbers that we're taking from the point in count statistics.
About a third. Okay.
It also breaks it down into various other things like which are the chronic. So there's a lot of numbers in the strategic plan. I want to take the time to go through all of that, but we could certainly have a follow-on session to deal with those kinds of specific.
Just generally speaking.
Yeah. So those are the general numbers. So 1/3 either are substance abuse or mental illness out of the 613.
So in their questionnaires and stuff, did they ask them that if housing would be provided, would they be interested in doing that, low-income housing, or was that not part of the questionnaires and so forth of the homeless?
All I can tell you is the results when
okay. All right.
So I don't know.
Yeah. But my point is, John, is that a reason not to do anything?
No,
okay, so that would be my response is, yeah, there probably are some.
But the question is, what kind of investment, if
well, I can tell you right now,
Taj Mahal is provided and, 10, 20 people are going to show up. So,
I don't think this county is going to build a Taj Mahal.
I doubt that.
And there are cost numbers in here.
Picture that. I've lived here too long.
And
I don't think it's necessary either.
The costs in emergency
What's not
rooms,
necessary?
A Taj Mahal.
Okay. All right.
The costs in emergency rooms to treat people repeatedly because they don't have a safe shelter and their health continues to deteriorate is far more than what is for sheltering. Those numbers are brought out in the study. So I can send you a link to the strategic plan.
Yeah, I got to get more up on that.
Understanding what that data is telling us, I think, is important. There's a lot of misconceptions.
Right.
So
that's why I'm asking.
The point about the cost of not taking action is enormous. Lots and lots of very validated research will tell you, and my own personal experience with this is that people, if they're homeless and they don't have anywhere to go and they're in an emergency and there's no emergency shelter, where do you go? You go to the emergency room at the hospital, or you go and get yourself arrested so you can be sent to jail because that's the last resort spot for you if you want some kind of shelter in bad weather. So we put an enormous burden on law enforcement, medical services, and other services by not providing some housing to start with.
Quick question. So we're unique on the Western Slope in that we have one incorporated city, and we seem to have a percentage of this need there. And so, what is the cooperation like between the city, the county, and private organizations, volunteers? Because you try to have a calm, civil conversation about this. And people I know in Placerville don't like the idea that the solutions are going to be in Placerville. And it's like, well, where's the need? Where are the services? We don't have transit here. They have transit in Placerville. Where's the hospital? Well, it's in Folsom here, Cameron Park, you know, same thing. There's a little bit of Marshall down here. So is that cooperation between the two, you know, two municipalities, essentially the county and the city in Placerville? Obviously, South Lake Tahoe is working on their own solutions. But is that real? Is that tangible? Is it something that's growing?
I don't want to take up too much time. I don't know how your agenda is.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the countywide, it's called a continuum care board. And so El Dorado County has a continuum care board. It is under the umbrella of EDOC, the El Dorado Opportunity Knox organization. And that continuum care board has representatives from law enforcement, from different jurisdictions, from the probation department, from the Health and Human Services, from the nonprofits that are working in this area. And they meet regularly to coordinate efforts and pull together plans. They're the ones that issued this report, this comprehensive
so that's
plan
a collaboration.
that was just, you know, finally finished. It was delayed because of COVID and the Calder fire. You know, lots of things got delayed because of that, but it was finally done in February. And that might be, you know, if your group is interested, somebody to come in and do that.
Well, and we can do that.
That explains the coordination part, because it's very true. You have to.
Because as we talk here, you know, we have different opinions, but what I've heard from people, and it's unfortunate. You know, people will throw the objection up to begin with, and you don't want to look, well, how can we remove that objection? How can we satisfy? So I was just curious.
Yeah, and it is a complicated issue, and everybody has opinions about it, obviously. And it is something we have to wrestle with, you know, as a community, and it's something we can't ignore because it's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. Well, I'm just telling you. And
I see the needs. You know, I was at Green Valley Church on Saturday for a meeting, separate meeting, and I had no clue that they have like a breakfast thing there for the homeless. And oh my gosh, that place was packed.
Was it overnight and then breakfast?
Is it overnight? Yeah. So it was neat to see, you know, and there's some people I knew that were driving up. They didn't stay overnight, but they're driving up to get a free meal. And, you know, I thought that was neat, but I never knew that they were doing that. So, you know, it's like any kind of development. It's the NIMBY thing. And, you know, low-income housing is one thing. Homeless shelters, that's like shelters and stuff. That's NIMBYism on steroids, you know, quite honestly, a lot of people not in my backyard, you know, they don't want it. That's the reality of it. And we deal with that on the Planning Commission, you know, with SB 35 projects and any kind of other low income stuff and everything. I don't necessarily agree with it, but, you know, that's here's the reality of it.
I know, but here's a reality too, an existential question.
Yeah.
What happens when we have a homeless fire from a homeless camp next fire season, and it takes off and does lots of damage? And we knew about this risk and we failed to take action. Right? I mean, I would think that would be a reason to act, wouldn't you? Even if you can set aside the humanity issues and just deal with the practical part of risk reduction, I think it is incumbent upon us as a community to face up to the facts and get busy solving this. There are lots of good solutions. They're not perfect, but there are better solutions that we have tested with time and experience and research, and we should deliver on them.
And we just approved, and I think, John, have you approved the final housing element? Has that come to you guys? Should be coming to you very soon. And that's to put ourselves in line with the state regs. And you and I talked, Frank, about inclusionary housing, which I'm really excited about, because I'd like to see that in all subdivisions, you know, to kind of spread it out and stuff. And you know, one of our prior commissioners, Commissioner Williams, he grew up in that type of situation and an impoverished situation. And he was with other folks who had more means. And it was kind of a helping hand up. And I thought that was a great approach, you know, through home ownership, you know, to help people, give them a helping hand up in areas they wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to live in with, you know, restrictions and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we've got to start moving towards a lot of that stuff that we have in the housing element, you know, it's been approved. So.
Any other leadership team questions or comments before we go to the general public? I do have one thing. Would you just speak briefly to coordinated entry? because that's where the primary data gets collected in addition to the point in time count.
Correct.
So that we have a formal database that defines what are the needs of each individual homeless person, and to a certain extent, what's their story? How did they get here? You know, because every homeless person has a different history and a different story. And to think that one size fits all, you're not going to get there, right? It really takes a number of different skills and facilities to be able to address all of the issues that are there and do it properly. So,
yeah. So a lot of it, so HMIS, which is, it's called Front Door, but it's the Homeless Intervention Management System, Information System. It is the gateway for, so when we have homeless clients in our winter lodging program, we have people trained to enter the data into the homeless intervention system to know, so that other agencies who might already be working with these folks know that we're working with them also as the winter lodging project. We also have, so other agencies and other entities that are involved in the continuum of care have access to that, and we can do case management inside of that, meaning we can direct people to certain services and get them tied together with assistance to help move them out of homelessness into housing and give them that hand up. We've had a number of proposals. The St. Joseph's Land Trust, which I'm really excited. One of their projects is to have, they actually have land that they're subdividing, and people are coming in and they get rights to the land. It's sort of, if you will, a mobile home park, but you buy the land, you have guaranteed low fixed cost on the land, unlike for-profit landowners, because it's held in trust. You get to build your own building on the land, usually a modular building. You own the building, and you own the rights to the building, and you own any appreciation on the building. So it's a way for you to get your leg up into your first house. Remember how important that was for all of us, at least for me, getting into my first little house, 800 square feet, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And, that was the leg up. So there are models to do that. And we would love to, when we get the community land trust going, we're going to start working on different models like that, as well as building multifamily housing and cottage developments and so on. There's all sorts of really creative, good stuff going on around the state and the nation. And we're looking forward to promoting those things and engaging the community and thinking about how to do them.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Let's start with Ron.
Ron Cassidy, Bridlewood Canyon. I have a question on the units that are planned and being built. Is there an income cap to get into those? Right. And is there a waiting list for?
They haven't, the ones I listed up here earlier,
right?
Those are all projects that have been proposed, approved, and are designed, and they are getting their final permitting and their funding lined up. I'm hoping one or two of them one of them might break ground this year. We'll see. But I think within the next year and a half, you're going to see all of those break ground. I'll pray on that. And then maybe some more. Those projects are affordable housing units, and they do it. It's based on 30% of whatever your income level is. It's capped at 30% of your income. So if you make $2,000 a year or a month, you're going to pay 30% of that on your rent. So that'd be $600, and that's your rent. And so that's how they do that. Yeah.
Anybody else? Kim?
Question or comment. First question. Do you think the new state laws and I think some county proposals to encourage dwelling units will make a difference in providing the housing numbers? I guess my comment is, I don't know what's going on with the closed juvenile halls that we have in Placerville near the government center. I know they closed it down and they moved it up to Tahoe, I believe. I don't know if they're reworking that or they're building a new bunch of houses juveniles. But that might be a facility that could be used for temporary homeless because it has food facility, it has showers, it has a bunch of things there.
It's been considered. It turns out that the court system is using the downstairs portion of that. We have a contract with the courts, and so we have an incompatibility that doesn't allow us to immediately go in there and change things. We've talked about relocating the courts to a different part of the county facilities and stuff, but we haven't made any progress on that. So right now, nothing's going on with that building that I know of. It's just sitting
I thought
there.
they were going to do a psychiatric.
Well, there's talk about that, but that hasn't been committed either. So there's a lot of talk of various uses of it, but a lot of it would take an investment to bring it up to standards for that particular application. So
I love your thinking, because we thought the same thing, and we made a pitch for it, and we didn't get anywhere with it. But
well, the sheriff's facility before we tore it down was the same thought, right? That it was so far gone, it just made no sense to try to put money into that because the roof was caving in and all kinds of problems. It was just time to basically.
Yeah, and you have to do your due diligence on properties. I mean, some of them you think are convertible just to this usage, and they may not be. They may have so many problems with them. It's it's just a black hole, and so you have to have people that know what they're doing, do the due diligence on it before you make real commitments. And so the county is prudent about how they spend money. I think that's a smart thing, and they do their due diligence.
The other thing we should point out: the money doesn't totally reside within the county's control. EDOC, COC through HUD and the state funding receives about 60% of the total funds that are available. The county receives about 40% for health and human services part of it. So it isn't like if the county says, no, this isn't going to happen, that it can't happen through the COC. So that's the other thing that's in play here. And it turns out, if you look at Placer County, they don't have the county as their administrator. They have a nonprofit as their administrator. They just purchased a hotel in Roseville to do the conversion on that under Operation Room Key or Project Room Key, or Home Key rather, Project Home Key. So there are different mixes of money and different applications, but it isn't limited by what the county might approve or the city might approve to get something done. That's unique from the standpoint of this type of housing for the homeless in particular. So any other questions or comments? Yeah.
I'm curious, how persuasive do you need to be on this subject? Mainly because, well, it comes to mind when you're talking about homeless encampments can be a source of wildfires. And it occurs to me, if I were a certain type of person, I would say, well, it would be incumbent on law enforcement to remove those encampments. I mean, you talk about we need to find housing for these folks. The flip side is don't let them camp.
Okay, so here's the good point. It's a great question. It's a great question. And the controlling factor here is that there is a legal ruling called Boise versus Winters that was, I think came into effect about 4 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. And it stipulates that you can't throw people out of encampments if you have nowhere for them to go. And so it kind of makes sense. How are you going to demand that this person who has no housing, you're going to send them off somewhere else? Well, where is that somewhere else? And again,
this only applies to public lands, not private lands, right? Yeah. But on public lands owned by the county, the city, whatever, the homeless have a right to be there if you don't have a place to put them into a proper shelter. And there's certain qualifications on the shelter.
Again, a reason for an emergency shelter. It won't solve all of that, but it'll solve a good portion of it because it gives you a place, a good, healthy, humane option to move some of these people.
That's a really good point. I did not realize that you couldn't shove people off. If I were that kind of person, I would just say, let's push them somewhere else.
That's a constraint. So I do have two online people.
So Andy Nevis, Commissioner Nevis, has been waiting a long time, and I know that Andy was involved in the big count. So Andy, if you're ready, go right ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner. Andy's a planning commissioner for El Dorado County, but for a different district. So right.
Yeah. Thanks for indulging me and letting me join you guys virtually down in El Dorado Hills. I wanted to tune in because I really enjoy hearing about the work of Housing El Dorado and what you guys are doing. And yeah, the pit count was quite an experience. I was down in Cameron Park and we only found one individual, but that said, there was certainly evidence of activity in other areas as well. And it was just an interesting experience to get to know some of the other folks that have been working on this issue for quite a long time. And I was privileged to go out with Cheyenne Purrington from Tahoe Coalition for the Homeless and that was a great experience. And Chair Vania, to answer your question, I don't recall that the question explicitly asked whether folks would be willing to accept housing, but definitely did ask about, you know, what types of housing they had before. So anyway, but the reason I raised my hand is I wanted to kind of respond to the comment that was made a little bit earlier about the county being basically unfriendly to developers who are looking to build affordable housing. And I think obviously that's an opinion, so we could you know, talk more about that. But I did want to raise for the group that the county is embarking on developing design standards for multifamily developments as well as commercial developments. And over the course of the next probably few years, we're hoping to get those established for every community in El Dorado County, including El Dorado Hills. And so the goal of that is to really have the discussion up front about what the community would like to see these multifamily buildings look like. And then once we've had that discussion, then that's kind of something that can be handed off to developers and basically say, hey, this is what the community has decided that it wants. If you know, were able to accommodate this, you know, you're not going to have as much controversy when you file your project. And so yeah, I'm really hoping that it will streamline things for applicants who are looking to build, especially multifamily housing. Because I certainly wouldn't dispute that we do need more of it. I mean, our RENA numbers show that very clearly. I just encourage both of the groups, Housing El Dorado. You know, so we're, again, this is going to be going on in every community in El Dorado County. We're starting with Shingle Springs, but I think Cameron Park and El Dorado Hills and Diamond Springs will be following shortly thereafter. So I hope you get the word, you know, are able to help us kind of get the word out to your membership and your supporters to help us in that process. And then as well, I'm sure Supervisor Heidel, you'll be getting the word out to this group here in El Dorado Hills when it's time to do El Dorado Hills, because yeah, we certainly do have to do better. I think everybody would agree with that. So anyway, that's all I had to say. But thank you, Frank, for all the work that you're doing for free.
Thank you, Andy.
We had one more hand up, and that was Ken Clement, but his hand is down now. Ken, if you still want to talk, go ahead and put your hand up. Okay. Looks like Ken's questions might have been answered.
Okay, all right. So any final go backs? Thank you very much, Frank, for the information.
I'm going to hand just a little update report on our winter lodging project.
Okay. Very good. So you are going to be hearing more about the process with the homeless and what's going forward as the Board of Supervisors makes their decisions on trying to come up with the emergency shelter type provision. I'll just mention two things. One of the things about the shelter is it has to be low barrier. And that's defined by a process which means it's easy for a homeless person to access. So there doesn't have to be a lot of constraints on getting into that shelter area. So there's been proposals on facilities that might be used and ways of housing the homeless on a temporary basis that didn't meet that low barrier type of provision. So there's a number of things you have to do to be compliant with HUD requirements. And that's, you know, the constraint on the funding, HUD's funding and the state's funding. So just mention that as well. So with that, thanks again, Frank. Really appreciate you taking the time, and there'll be more coming as we get into further discussions. And if we really want to have a presentation of what's in the strategic plan, we can certainly do that. There's a lot of detailed data in there. I'm hoping people are reading that. There's actually a PowerPoint already put together, but if the desire of the leadership team is to bring something like that back and cover it in detail, we certainly can do that at the appropriate time. So again, thanks for the information, and we'll move from there. So I'm going to go to item 4, which are supervisor communications. And the first one is just to address the homeless strategic plan. There's 4 elements of the strategic plan, but before, you know, rather than going through the details of that, I want to emphasize the first one is prevention. how do you keep people from becoming homeless? And to me, that's a key element you have to consider. You don't always want to be the reactive side of how do you deal with the homeless once they're there? How do you prevent homelessness? And I think I share the same opinion or concern that Frank does relative to with the evictions going on from landlords. Once those start getting issued, I'm sure there will be people that will be moved out of properties. They'll be evicted from properties. And where are they going to go? Typically, if they have a family member they can go live with, if they have a friend, they'll try to link up that way. But you can almost anticipate for a certain number of them, they're going to have no place to go. And they're just going to add to the homeless count. And then we have to try to determine how do we work with those people. I will also mention that the Project Room Key, which has been operating very successfully in Pollock Pines for well over a year. And it was a COVID thing of how you take the people in the most risk, the elderly, those who have major disabilities, et cetera, and put them into a sheltered area that they will be less susceptible to the COVID spread. So we basically contracted with a hotel, the Best Western in Pollock Pines, and I think there's 27 rooms, if I remember right, up there that were utilized. That program is coming to a conclusion here at the end of March. And I don't think all those people have been placed yet. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm guessing there's half of them that are still there that haven't been placed. And so my concern with that is, well, what happens to those homeless who we know are some of the most vulnerable when we turn them out of Project Room Key? Where are they going to go? Because they're probably the most disabled, the most needy from the standpoint of needing services and support of any of the homeless that are out there. So where are they going to go when Project Room Key shuts down? So these are things we're trying to evolve with the county and trying to determine where we can come up with an emergency qualifying shelter to move people into. But as of yet, there is no answer to that. And I think it's the end of March, may go on further than that because it really comes down to when the money runs out, but they were forecasting the end of March is when that probably would terminate. So that's just an additive thing on top of evictions, because essentially our Project Room Key is going to be evicting people out of the program. So all are to be concerned with. So that's important. And if you'd like, what I'm going to make sure Cindy does is include a link when we put out the minutes of this meeting that will both go to the written 108-page strategic plan with all the narrative, and then also the PowerPoint presentation that they made if you want to take the summary view without reading through all the details. So both of those will be linked in our minutes when we send them out. You'll have direct access to that. One click and you're there. Second thing is application for generations. Many of you may remember the Dixon Ranch property and the application that happened. They've done a lot of work to redesign certain things, come up with a more compatible layout for compatibility with adjacent properties, which are primarily Green Springs Ranch and adjacent areas. So that has been submitted as a formal application. I'm assuming APAC we'll be having a discussion at some point.
Well, I had an email exchange with Aiden, and they are eager to come and talk to APAC when it's appropriate. So they're probably not ready right now.
Right. I think that's what this is kind of just a heads up. That application's been submitted. They've started the process with the county. I know in following it from when it was originally, the original proposal was turned down by the Board of Supervisors in 2017. Was primarily turned down because of one major input, and that came from our auditor controller, who basically had done a financial analysis and came to the conclusion this is a loser for the county. The county will be putting money into keeping this property maintained, et cetera. And that's a separate analysis that he did. And me being new on the board, when I heard that, I go, wow, that's a non-starter for me. The county doesn't have enough funds to do the work we need to do. Why would we want to take on a new development project that isn't going to pay its own way? So without digging into it a lot, I accepted the auditor controller's presentation that happened live during the board meeting where that happened. I voted against the generations and the Dixon Ranch property, and essentially they had to go back and restart. And that's where this new generations concept came from, because the Dixon Ranch proposal was a lot more units and tighter densities, et cetera. So,
and they did come back to APAC shortly after that and discuss that, this is the only project they've ever had that was denied out of years of projects, and that they talked to us again shortly after that, not in a meeting, but to let us know, hey, we're looking at how we can overcome these objections and make this something that's not a burden to the county, that places appropriate buffer areas to the existing 5 and 10 acre parcels that surround their development. And their commitment at the time, they were talking about still providing the impacts at the higher level of the original project in terms of mitigating Green Valley Road, the traffic concerns. So I don't know where they're at with that now, if things change, if there's other projects that might play into that, but I'm sure we'll hear all about it.
We will. We'll a lot more information to come on that. I just wanted to, again, give you a heads up that they have submitted a formal application. So that's in process.
If you want to look at it, it's linked on the APAC website. So
there you go. Final thing, El Dorado Hills Chamber Business Walk is going to be held Thursday, March 31st. Myself, as well as my assistant Cindy, are going to be participating in that. We do have 3 members of the El Dorado County staff that have volunteered to participate as well. It's going to be the afternoon, so it starts, I think, at 1 o'clock, but that's where we go around and talk with business owners to determine how's your business doing, what can the chamber do in addition to what they have been doing to help promote your business, what kinds of concerns do you have with what the county should be doing to make sure that your business flourishes and is viable, those kinds of things. So it's a chance to collect data and get some dialogue started. I really enjoyed it the last time I did it. They haven't done it the last couple of years because of the COVID thing. So, but we do have the county staff participating as well as my office participating. So we'll bring you the results of that when they're available. But I think it's, it's just getting a pulse on what are the businesses within El Dorado Hills and what are their needs? What is it we can all do to try to help them? And I'm guessing a lot of the comments we're going to get this time around are going to be related to workforce. I got a business and I want to expand it, but I don't have enough people wanting to come to work anymore, right? And I can only pay X amount of money, minimum wage plus 20% or something. So I had people before. Now that COVID's hit, I can't get anybody that wants to come to work. So that's going to be one of the things, the responses I think we're going to hear. And I don't know all the restaurants are back at capacity, but a lot of them for some period of time were only having half their facility or 2/3 of facility open because they couldn't get staff to wait tables and serve people, right? You can't run a restaurant if you don't have the service part.
So a lot of anecdotal stories like that going around. I know even I was getting tires on my kid's car at Bedell, and it's normally something he just tells me to wait. He goes, "Well, you come back at the end of the day." Like, why? I can't. Nobody will do this. His certified mechanics are certified, and there's a place for them. They're they make a good wage. But the guys who change the tires and do sort of the more basic maintenance, he can't keep anybody there. So it's a challenge.
It is a challenge, but there's an opportunity for homeless people if we can give them the proper education, the right tool set, some administrative help, and some oversight, that sort of thing. There are jobs available. That's a good thing. If you can give people a hand up and help them get into a career or some kind of a job occupation that they can take care of themselves and or their family, it's going to be a winner for everybody. So those were the 3 items I wanted to present tonight. Does anybody have any comments or questions on those? Okay, seeing none, let's go into our normal rotation on the reports. We always start with public safety. And I did notice before that we had
Andrew Brown.
Officer Brown, CHP. Andrew, you there?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Excellent. So again, I'm Officer Brown with the California Highway Patrol in the Placerville area. Just a quick report, just kind of numbers. For D1 or the general El Dorado Hills area, we conducted 18 arrests in the month of February. 10 of which were DUI, and then 5 of those were DUI crashes. Those were in the El Dorado Hills area. So to give some perspective, so that's 45% of all our arrests happened in that area. And this encompasses the western slope from Twin Bridges west to the county line, north to the county line in Placer County, and south to Amador County. So 45% of our arrests happen just in D1. 42% of all our DUI arrests happen in D1, and then 45% of all our DUI crashes. We conducted 23 crash investigations in D1, so that's about just over 26% of all our crashes as a whole happen in that area, but you can see that's disproportionate. It should be around 40% or 40+%. We want to proportionately ratio it out with DUI crashes, but it's not. It's disproportionate. We have a higher amount of DUI crashes in D1 in that area than we do in the rest of the county, which is, you wouldn't think of it because it's more developed roadways. but it just lends to the fact there's more population. Maybe we're able to get there before your buddy pulls you out of the ditch. I don't know. So we just want to encourage everyone, please drive sober. It's a real big thing in El Dorado County. So much of a thing that we've been awarded a special grant. That grant continues. We'll be sending out invitations to those who are invited for our second quarter roundup to discuss our process, our progress with that grant, and what we've done additionally in our area to help curb the DUI crashes. Earlier, we had a quite a high profile fatal collision where a 14-year-old was hit and killed on Carson Road up in Camino, and our hearts truly go out to the family. Organizations such as MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, has really come along, and they are victim advocates, especially for the surviving family. They're doing some great things, helping the victim's family go through this kind of daunting, ununderstandable process of the criminal justice system now as we go forward with that case. And so we want to reach out and thank MAD for their assistance with that, and also keep these investigators in your thoughts and prayers as they move forward, continuing to investigate this crash. And it's hard for all of us, but we strive for justice for the victim, and we strive for justice for all the victim families out there of DUI. It's a real bear on our county. It's hard for us to deal with, and emotionally when we're dealing with the death of a young one like that. And we just want to reiterate to everyone out there that shockingly, most of our DUI crashes, when we're talking about up on the hill, are very high level blood alcohol levels. We want to encourage everyone that this is a cultural problem that needs to be addressed at the family, home, friend level. We can only arrest so many people. We can only take so many people to jail. And until it's, we want to push and stress out to you that please talk to your friends, please talk to your neighbors, please talk to your family about DUI and their consumption of alcohol. And maybe it's an issue that they need to get addressed with addiction counseling or what have you. But it's a real thing, and it's not a victimless crime, and people die daily from it. We're talking about every 2 minutes somebody's injured from a DUI crash in the United States, and that's a shocking statistic if you look at the weight and the financial burden that is on all police agencies across the nation, and hospital staff and counties, roadways, all the above. It's something that we need to, as a whole, when we're talking about 11,000 people dying in this country every year from DUI, when we went to war for less than 3,000 people for 20 years. So let's put that in perspective. Let's take some steps forward to stop this DUI. And we as the Highway Patrol are taking significant steps in arresting and in our enhanced enforcement, including education, to make people aware that DUI is the real deal. And we want to make sure that people have the resources to be able to get home safely. So if it comes to calling a friend, having that conversation with a parent, a brother, a sister, saying, I'll be there for you. I'll be that call at 2 a.m. to give you that ride home if you need it, so that you don't have that issue. Or make sure you're in a place that gets Uber, gets a taxi, does something, get a ride home with a sober friend. Do what you can to mitigate that and just reduce this risk. Last night we had an awesome time. Right there in Station 85, we had the Boys Teen Charity. We were able to present our Start Smart program to that group. Awesome group of boys there. I'd say 60 boys, and I'd just like to promote that Boys Team Charity is an awesome group, and we were happy to give them teach them Start Smart class, and we're willing and able to do all sorts of educational programs and driver safety programs for groups from all ages, whether it be teens to adults to our aging community as well. So just feel free to reach out if you have a group in mind or you'd like me to present something at your next meeting or group that you have. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. So questions or comments for Andrew, leadership team first, anybody? Okay, members in the conference room. And I'm not seeing any hands raised unless you are. So thank you again, Andrew, for your presentation and stuff. And I guess I want to emphasize that DUIs are not always alcohol, right? They're substances too. And so we have to recognize that those youth or whatever that are into substance abuse, they can be the recipients of DUIs just as much as someone who's been drinking alcohol. So I guess my question, Andrew, are you seeing an increasing number of young people, and I'll say under 25, that are involved with DUIs, or is it primarily a distribution of age, or are you seeing trends that concern you from the standpoint of age?
Right at this time, I'm not seeing a lot of younger folks, but we generally reflect the demographic of the county, and the demographic of the county is generally trends to be older. We are seeing significantly high blood alcohol levels. So when we're talking about alcohol, we're not talking about somebody where we're regularly arresting somebody after they've crashed at a point, 08 or to a 10. We're talking 0.20 plus. It's a very shockingly high amount of blood alcohol level anecdotally that we're seeing. And it does not happen on a whim that somebody decides to drink that much and get behind the wheel. That is years, if not decades, of practice, building up that sort of tolerance to be able to think, even consider getting behind the wheel at those blood alcohol levels. We're talking about people who have been driving drunk regularly for years, that they're rolling the dice every time, and it came up highway patrol on their dice. So like I said, this goes back to a significant cultural issue with generally the United States and this county, that we need to talk about DUI more often, and especially drugs, but also alcohol, that it is not worth the risk. We're talking about the death of a 14-year-old girl that did not need to happen. So like I said, just encourage that conversation throughout all age demographics. But yes, it's not just alcohol. Drugs, if they impair you, you will be pulled over. You will be put in jail. It's not one of those things where we just can't detect it, or now that you're just testing the marijuana that was in my blood 2 weeks ago. No, we're a little bit smarter than that, and we can definitely put you under the influence of those controlled substances with no problem.
Thank you. I appreciate your response. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and move on to our fire report, because I'm not seeing anybody from the Sheriff's Department who's with us this evening. So Chief Lilly.
All right. Well, thank you. Michael Anthel again, Deputy Chief with the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. And we have some great things going on, and the chief's back here, so I'm gonna let him share the most exciting of the topics. But to start with just some general stuff to be aware of. Obviously, it's been a really dry year. I think January, February, as we all know, and heading into March, there hasn't really been any rain. We're seeing the vegetation fires starting, especially today with a little bit of north wind. We've had a number of, since we've been sitting in this meeting, just escape burn piles. So our notice to everyone is we do want you to get out and do your defensible space, clear that 100 feet around your property, but just use cautious with burn piles. Make sure you monitor, make sure that you have water out there with you, and don't leave them unattended, because we are seeing a significant number of fires. The other kind of reminder is when you're doing your defensible space is just make sure you're not using a lawnmower to mow lots. A regular lawnmower with the metal blades will often hit a rock and start another fire, so you end up causing a problem where you're trying to prevent a problem. So a couple of reminders there. And coupled with that, we're starting our annual defensible space program and our vacant lot inspection programs. So our inspectors are being hired now and being trained and getting ready, and they'll be out there a lot with the chief's vision, which he may share a little bit more on. But we've been very aggressive here in El Dorado Hills, not only with solving the problem here in our community and our vacant unimproved lots, but even throughout the county. And so, Chief, you want to tie in on the other big exciting news and anything else?
Good evening. I think that's on. Good evening, Mo Johnson, Fire Chief, El Dorado Hills Fire Department. What Chief Lilienthal is alluding to is at the March 3rd special board meeting, the board of directors did award a bid for construction for the fire training facility down in the business park to DG Grenade, a local company here in El Dorado County. So we do have a groundbreaking ceremony on March 10th, 2 p.m. at Cypress Point down there. Everybody's invited, including the public. We're very excited about that. That's really been a 20-year vision by multiple fire chiefs, multiple boards, and we've been talking about this for 20 years. And it's taken a different vision, a different, size and scope. And I think where we're at today is what's reasonable, what's necessary and needed for not only this community but our firefighters to provide that comprehensive, in-depth training on a regular basis that they need, and live fire training, which is missing really in this county. So we're excited about that, and we can't wait to get that off and going. Like I said, groundbreaking March 10th, 2 p.m. and then probably around April 1st-ish, May at the latest, they'll have some dirt moving out there. 365-day build time. And we are ecstatic. I'll be hitting the send button here, or post button, whatever it's called in social media here shortly on Facebook to send out that news, as well as a video fly through of the training facility. So yeah, great news on that. A couple other things going on in the department. We are experiencing some technical challenges, both with our phone systems, as our internet connections and our website. So that's been something Chief Lilienthal has been working on for some time. We did recently go out to bid for a new IT company, and we're working on that transition to the new company at this time. So we know we've had some significant challenges there, and those challenges continue at least until we get this company on board. So we're working hard on that. And that does affect, meeting information, that does affect our notifications, that does affect our plan intake, if you will. From our builders, and so it is absolutely high priority for us, and Chief Lilienthal's all over it. One other point that Chief Lilienthal brought up was our focus on our vegetation management program. You may know, for many years, we've had a vegetation management program here in El Dorado Hills. It's been very robust. We look at about 3,500 vacant properties a year, and that's significant. A few years ago, we stopped using our community risk reduction staff to do that, because what happens is when vegetation management season rolls around, everybody stops and they move over and everybody focuses on vegetation management, because it is a very big program. We can't do that anymore because what happens is everything starts to get behind in their regular days. So when you talk about the amount of growth that we have in our community, we can no longer shift them over to do that. So we went out and we started hiring specific defensible space inspectors to handle that workload. With that comes some capacity, and that capacity, not only are we doing the El Dorado Hills Fire Vegetation Management Program, but we're also working with the county last year, and we're working on that potentially here this year as well to expand that from the rescue area outside of the El Dorado Hills area. We're looking at the Diamond Springs area, and these are all determined by the county, and we simply operate as a contractor with these inspectors conducting those defensible space inspections as it relates to the county ordinance 5101. So you might ask, why is El Dorado Hills looking at those or doing those inspections outside of El Dorado Hills? One is we have the ability, we have the infrastructure, we have the knowledge, and certainly we have the expertise. Two is it is our shared vision that we are fire safe and wildfire safe in this county. And what that means is we need to take that lead step in saying, yes, we will do this not only in our area, but in other areas to help them more fire safe. It also helps the county, and we like to think of ourselves as a really good partner with the county in their vision of not only implementing that ordinance 5101, but also making sure that we're able to deliver that. And so it's been a great partnership. We hope to continue to do that, and I'll take any questions that you might have.
I just emphasize from the county's perspective, I was talking to Don Ashton today, and he sees the benefit of going through the fire department to do those inspections, because we really don't have a career ladder or anything for, seasonal type inspectors. You might be able to attract people, but I think from the standpoint of somebody willing to take on that kind of a job, they're always looking for, okay, but where am I going to be 5 years from now? Do I have a ladder I can move into with some training? Could I do something different?
Sure.
And it may be very limited with the county because it's a specialty type of skill that is required for that fits much better with the fire department. So I personally, and I think Don Ashton as well, sees a real benefit to having that service provided by an agency that specializes in it, as opposed to other county employees that we may not be able to retain. And then there's a turnover thing and everything else. So I think that's a very positive aspect of it. The other, I guess, question I have is relative to the training facility. What was the award amount?
Sure.
Approximately?
Yeah, the award amount was $11.7 million to
Okay.
DG Granada. There were 7 bidders that bid on the project. It went out for well over 30 days, and a lot of local companies, some others from outside. We were happy to award that to a local company.
And is that part of a phased project now? Because that was, I'm going
Sure.
back to remembering what we did years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, so when we look at, a phase project, clearly, as the agency grows, as the challenges within our jurisdiction change, we'll want to add or change those components within the training center. So yes, this is looked at as a phase 1. We are looking at what we can afford in hand versus any kind of debt financing or anything like that. This is in fact what we've collected development impact fees for a number of years for. And so that's what we're applying to use those funds for today. So as we look in the next phases, we would look simply as, we have a mechanic now for the agency. So looking at a fleet facility, a logistics facility, or facility that can hold all of our apparatus that's not used all year round, but it might be used in the fire season. Our stations are chock full with apparatus, and it'd be nice to put those in place rather than in the fire station to free up some of that space. So others, we might look at a larger tower down the road. It might be a Class B tower. That's still not decided on yet. And then finally, probably a classroom facility. And I'll even say potentially even the admin facility as we are bursting at the seams at this facility. That might be a surprise to one of my bosses over there, but these are things that we're always looking at. And so we have the space down there, the land or the property, if you will, down there. So we're just looking down the road.
Excellent. Yeah, great. Thank you.
And well, either the property is in fact next to the station in the business park. So
yes,
at 2 p.m. on the 10th, correct?
Yes, 2 p.m. on the 10th, and it'll actually be in the court, not the fire station, but
on the side street.
Exactly, the Cypress Point.
So the district owns 20 acres down there, if I'm remembering, and
15.
15?
We sold 5.
Okay, sold 5 off. And so the station occupies about 5 of that roughly, and
Correct.
The training facility, phase 1, this first phase would occupy roughly another 3.
Yeah, I'd say 3 to 5-ish, right around there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So there's still property there. So for the
absolutely.
expansion you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was great to acquire that property when they did. I don't know who did that.
I know.
Planning for expansion. That was really good. Anyway, yeah.
Well, I wish I could go there, but I'll be doing the hard job of going to Kauai. So
oh my God,
somebody's got to do it, right? So
you can zoom in if you'd like.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that there's a big sign there saying it, so you will be able to see it if you drive down and look at it. And from the board perspective, we unanimously agreed. One board member was not there; he had a commitment he could not get out of for another reason. But this is an investment in the community of El Dorado Hills.
Absolutely,
it's an investment in our firefighters, the men and women who go out. They get repetitive training at a local site, so they don't have to be off-site and backfilling up with extra hours and overtime work. But ultimately, when you have a well-trained firefighting force, the citizens that live in the area supported by that firefighting are best served. Firefighters will get there. They will be reactive. It's instinctive. They will not even think to do the right thing because they have been trained on it. Our firefighters average over 300 hours of training a year. Several of them get over 500 hours. They volunteered for more time. They want to learn everything they can. This is an investment for the community, and it's money very, very well spent.
No, great points, Director Wright. You know, we say in the fire service that we train until we can't get it wrong. And another saying that I'll give you is that the moment of truth, the firefighter will not rise to the occasion, but rather will fall to their level of training. And that's something that I truly, truly believe in. I know Officer Brown that's still on the line there, he can attest to that as well. It's the same thing in law enforcement. It's the same thing in military. We need to train the way we actually do the job, because if you make things up or you cut corners here or pretend there, what's going to happen when you are really facing that? So it's tremendously important to us. And you know, I've been asked a lot, you know, by folks, does El Dorado Hills need a $12 million, $11.7 million training facility? And I can tell you unequivocally, yes. And it has less to do with the number and more to do with the importance of the training, not only for our firefighters, but to give our firefighters a chance to save our citizens in that time of need. And it might not ever happen, or it might happen once, but who wants to put a value on that? The cost of the training center is simply that cost of the training center. That is what construction costs are today. We've been looking at this for 20 years now, and I can tell you in 20 more years, the cost won't be any cheaper. The phased approach is the best approach because that allows us to get our firefighters something today. We didn't want to build a parking lot in hopes of building a training center down the road because there's a lot of parking lots in the fire service around there today.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you for that report. So, anything else, Chief Lilly, you wanted to add to that? Okay. Then we'll move on to, let's just go down the list here. Economic development. So Community and Economic Development Advisory Committee. Glenn is not with us this evening, I don't believe. Did he join us? No, okay, so he's absent. So infrastructure, status of the proposed roundabout Bridlewood. I know we've had discussions with DOT about that, and Mr. Oates is here.
Well, I wasn't going to call out Zach, but I did talk to, unless Zach wants to participate, I'll leave that optional for him. But I did talk to Rafael Martinez this morning, and he had indicated, he gave me an update. And the El Dorado Hills CSD is going to be, and they're in the middle, and they've identified in their environmental document for that roundabout. So that's huge because we should be able to get the environmental done probably in the next couple of months, you know, when it comes to that. So, and then we'll be able to start applying for grant applications, be it air quality. I know Raphael had a meeting with the Bridlewood Association folks today. And so, and we have other commitments from, you know, Parker Development and the CSD for the construction of that roundabout. So we're getting there. It's positive news, and you know, it's going to be dependent a lot on grant funding and going forward. So, so I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Zach, that I'm missing?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I think you have all the high points there, John. It's about right. CSD had a couple alternatives in their environmental document, one for an access at Silver Springs, and the other being the roundabout at Bridlewood to that parking lot, kind of on that east side of the lake. Yeah, the environmental document sounds like it's a few months away. At that point, we'll be able to start looking at some other funding opportunities.
Great, thank you. And any questions on that, Mr. Bridlewood?
Well, I'm not Bridlewood. I'm just living next door.
Oh, you're right next door.
No, we had a conversation, I think, in 2019 with Raphael about the potential for this.
Right.
And understood that from the department's perspective is that, you know, they need a seed money essentially from the Bridlewood community. And, you know, at that time, my perspective was, having lived there for 27 years, is that, you know, it's really not a Bridlewood issue, but this is an opportunity for them to resolve something that's impacting them directly. To be honest, it's a community issue, and it's for anybody who drives on Bass Lake Road. But it's unfortunate we couldn't spread that pain around a little bit more. But you know, you got to be able to get a win where you can. So, and I know that a lot of residents, you know, a roundabout was nobody's ideal solution, but right now it looks like the only solution. So, if we want connectivity to the other side of the park, we want safety improvements. Hopefully people are eager to embrace that and they understand that, you know, there's some cost. We do have a hand up, and I'm sure, let's see, Deborah, let me allow Deborah to talk. Sure. Deborah, I know you're concerned about this, so go ahead.
Yes, hi, Deborah Simon. I live in Bridlewood. Bridlewood residents are not aware of any of this, and we are not happy about it. You know, it's been floated around quite a bit, and it just doesn't seem to make sense that you wouldn't consult, you know, the residents and even our HOA. I know there's a lot of communication about it. You know, the plan, or at least what we've heard, is that there's the park across from Bridlewood is going to have about 500 parking spots. And you're going to have a roundabout and an entrance to Bridlewood, an entrance to the park. And it is right in the middle of coming at both directions. You're coming off a curve. And, you know, I've lived here for 25 years, and, you know, the speed is ridiculous. The traffic now is just nuts. And on top of that, you have all the giant trucks going up Bass Lake Road. They're coming up Bass Lake Road and going to the new development across from the middle school on Green Valley. So right now there's giant earth movers and dump trucks full of rocks and all kinds of things going on. And that's going to go on for a few years. I think we're the dumping ground. Parker should have been done something in front of his entrances. I know Woodridge, you got a nice, you know, turning lane and everything that went into there. We're the oldest community, and we're kind of getting dumped on here. We don't want a roundabout. It seems to be the, you know, the cheapest thing. You know, we were told that we were going to get 4-lane roads, 4 lanes coming up Bass Lake Road, turning lanes, etc., maybe a stop sign. You know, I just know we have enough trouble with vandalism and everything in Bridlewood. We've already got cars backed up trying to get into our gate. I don't see a roundabout as being being helpful at all. And just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So, you know, it sounds like you've got the CSD involved. We've heard nothing from them. You've got grant funding. Parker, of course, has been a thorn in our side for many, many years. You know, with his 65 homes in front of Bridlewood, they're not even living in there yet. I mean, when that's built out, it's going to be impossible. And like I said, a roundabout coming from both ways, you're on a curve. I mean, I was over at Roseville and just did a roundabout at the Galleria Mall. Even that one, when you're coming at like 15, 20 miles an hour on a straightaway, is an issue. And I don't know how you expect people coming from 2 ways on a curve at 50 miles an hour with trucks and with people trying to get out of Bridlewood and potentially 500 people trying to park in the park. I see it as nothing but a disaster. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the solution is. But like I say, Bridlewood's the oldest community around here, and we're getting dumped on. That's how a lot of people feel. And there's no way we're going to pay for it. Absolutely not. You will never get consensus in Bridlewood to increase our HOA fees to pay for this, pay for the roundabout. So that's, you know, opinion of a lot of people in Bridlewood. And like I said, no one's talked to our HOA about it or talk to Bridlewood about it. So anyway, that's.
Well, there's a whole lot there that I'm probably not going to address most of that. I know there have been conversations going on between DOT and the Homeowners Association leadership. We got Ron Cassidy right here that is nodding, and I know that in fact.
Ron Cassidy is not HOA, I'm sorry.
He's been involved in the past. So all I'm trying to say is, you know, it might be, you know, maybe sometime in the future. I know we've come to Bridlewood on other issues in the past, and you know, maybe we can talk to Raphael. It may be good at some point as things advance, depending on what's going to be developed, as well as the park. Again, they're just going through the environmental phase of it and so forth as well, that it might be good to have an informational meeting at some point in the future to maybe shake out. I have some knowledge, which I'm not going to bog down the meeting with particulars at this point, but I could also come to the meeting and provide some history when I was on staff years ago, like the turn pocket on Madera, you know, I worked out with the developer because that was conditioned to put a right turn pocket in, and I horse traded to put a left turn pocket at Madera. And that was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. So it was a long, wow, it was a long time ago. So, and I actually, you know, in some of the Serrano projects, I fought for a left turn pocket, but I was told by the consultants and the engineers that it didn't meet warrants. And so, you know, and I have no idea why a left turn pocket was not put in with Bridlewood from the beginning, you know, based on the hundreds of homes that are in there. But but there's a lot there. Speeding, you know, certainly at the curve, you know, they would have to design it in such a way in a safe manner and have to do some widening and straightening out the curve for the approaches for the roundabout and those type of issues. But those kind of things, I think, you know, we can talk further, Supervisor Heidel, and maybe talk to Raphael. We have a meeting with him next week. Yeah. And maybe talk to him about maybe a you know, a public meeting with the residents there in sometime in the future. So I'll leave it at that.
There are two more community members from Bridlewood I can see in here, but I'll jump in before we call Ken because he's been waiting the longest. Zach, with their environmental documents for the park, we had always talked about an entrance at Silver Springs and an auxiliary access point at either Madera or at Bridlewood. Is that still what they're proposing, or?
I believe what they're showing is alternative one would be four-way stop controlled intersection at Silver Springs with an entrance into that parking lot on the east side. Alternative two would be the roundabout at Bridlewood running.
But it's not both.
It would be either or.
So they don't need two access points for?
The parking lot on the east side is much smaller.
Like 140?
Yeah,
ish. And then we had also talked about 500 or 700 on the west side, but I had also heard from people on their scoping committee that it's closer to about 900 parking stalls is what they had talked about just about 6 months ago.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but
okay.
There is a much larger.
Not to put you on the point. I know that's their document. I just wondered if you had any input for that.
Access is going to be off the Serrano Parkway.
Yeah.
I believe there will be an access off of Bass Lake.
Yeah, the EID driveway.
Yeah.
Right. So Ken, we've got you live now. If you want to go ahead and jump in. Looks like you're still muted, Ken.
Hi, sorry about that. Had to pay attention to my screen. Yeah, this is Ken Clement. I'm president of the HOA there. And before I talk, I wanted to have Deanne Gillick, who is part of the group that actually has been talking to DOT. So if you can go ahead and mute me and put Deanne on, that'd be better. She's more well-versed in this.
Okay, I haven't talked to Deanne in a while, but I saw her waiting. So Deanne, you're free and clear?
Yeah, hi there. Deanne Gillick, and a resident of Bridlewood, and my husband, Bill Gillick, is on the HOA board. Just wanted to touch on a couple things. Bill and I, we have had conversations with Raphael Martinez, probably 3 or 4 on behalf of Bridlewood HOA as well as residents, expressing, getting updates and expressing our concerns regarding the roundabout. I think that we echo many of the comments that Deborah Simon provided, but just wanted to clear up some of the facts. That we have had conversations with DOT. Our message has been to improve the safety along the Bass Lake Road, improve the safety for the turn conflicts as on the traffic as well as the pedestrian. We have raised some questions regarding the roundabout in our goal for it to be safe. Some of the issues that Deborah brought up regarding the turn, that there's about 5 driveways on that section of the road along the bend along the lake, which causes conflicts and concerns and sight distances. The stacking in the Bridlewood neighborhood into a gated community, and having a roundabout placed at the gated community, forcing people on the roundabout that might go right into a gate and they have no place to go. So those are some of the safety and some of the design concerns that we've raised. Don't have an opinion on whether this it's the right fit for our neighborhood, we'd like the analysis to demonstrate whether or not a roundabout at this location on the turn with the gated community is the right option and will improve the safety rather than just cause different safety concerns than what currently is at issue. There's no concern that a roundabout can't handle the capacity of the traffic and help potentially with the capacity of the traffic. It's the facts related to the specific location, the driveways, the gate, etc. So just want to provide that update that, you know, we've had conversations, look forward to future conversations and that analysis. And also, I've reached out to the CSD. I know there was an update that they were doing the analysis. We have not had specific conversations with the CSD or received an update from them. We would very much like to do that and are interested in that. So we do, you know, hope that we can discuss with CSD. Our discussions at this point have been focused with County Department of Transportation. So just want to provide that update. Can respond to questions, and I know Ken Clement also was going to provide some comments potentially. So thank you.
Thanks, Deanne. Ken, you're still unmuted if you want to follow up on anything there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Deanne. And thank you, Council. Yeah, and I can't say it any better than Deanne does. You know, she and Bill have been meeting with the various groups. One thing that we've asked at our last board meeting that we'd like this group, you know, it seems like it's kind of a done deal that the roundabout's the answer, and we want the data. We want safety. I've been there 26 years. I've seen the things that have happened. I've seen all of us paying our traffic impact fees when we came in, and now we're being asked for a new fee to be put on us as Bridlewood neighbors like a Mello-Roos. And as Debbie said, I doubt that's going to happen. But what we want is we want that information to be brought to the homeowners. Ultimately, it's the homeowners that are going to be making that decision as far as any funding, if at all, is going to happen. And it's not the five of us that set up those board meetings, but it's the community. And they're the ones who should hear not just, well, this is what we think should work, but we need the facts, because once the graders are moved and the concrete's gone and all of that, we're all going to be left with a solution that is short-sighted and not the best solution based on what we've seen so far. So that's really all we're asking for. We just hope that people, it seems like it's already a done deal that, hey, this roundabout's what's going to go in front of, you know, our neighborhood for the convenience of everybody else for issues that we did not cause. So that's all we're asking for. And the Gillicks are working on that in certain parts of it, and we as a board will work on those others. But the key part is we want someone to come to our meeting and talk to the 324 homeowners that live in Bridlewood Canyon. Because hearsay and representation by non-representation, you know, we want people to come to us. So you can reach out to me, you can reach out to the Management Trust, who's a management company for us, or you can reach out to Bill and Deanne Gillick. So that's it. I just want to say thank you for this time.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that.
Anybody else in the room? How many?
I had one other issue. There's this project you probably haven't heard of called Central El Dorado Hills. And it looks like on our calendar, we're going to have 2 more meetings. Yes, only 2. One is going to be an informational meeting. Okay, we get somebody still on.
Yeah.
So we're going to have an informational meeting with some of the changes and public comments. And then we're going to have the next meeting to deliberate at the Planning Commission. So it's either going to happen in the 2 meetings in April, or it's going to be the last meeting in April and the first meeting in May. So just give you kind of a status update. So we're getting there. So that's all.
Okay, very good. Any questions on infrastructure? John, comments, anything else? All right, we got that one covered. Let's move on to good governance.
I will be brief to summarize the other topics that Mr. Heidel provided me some information on several bills that have been introduced. The phrase that we've been using for so much has been because of COVID. We say because of COVID, this, that, because of COVID, that. These bills are, frankly, because of COVID. COVID exposed us to remote participation in public meetings. Several of these bills propose variations of how remote contact can be had with the public and also with the government officials, and discuss how to better do that. There's also a bill that arises from COVID because of controversy that happened at public meetings on issues related to COVID. Should the schools have masks? Should the schools be open? Should the schools be closed? There was substantial media coverage as to the more extreme events that happened at one or two of those meetings. It even got raised to the level of the federal government saying there should be protection for school board members and things of this nature. My immediate concern goes to the accessibility of the public to those who govern them. And are the meetings for the people who govern, or are the meetings for the people who are governed? And I think that's a very difficult yet important balance that has to be looked at. And while technology has allowed us to do some interesting things, it's kind of ironic. We get angry at our children when they spend too much time in front of the screen, or they spend too much time on their phone. And we say, you need personal contact. You need to interact with people in real life. And I also believe we need to interact with our elected officials in real life. I think technology and screens remove us farther from that environment. And I would hope that these bills are looked at very carefully before they're implemented, because I think we have the absolute least transparency when we are face to face. And I think if we want more community participation, then maybe we need to look at how we design our meetings so that we can get the community in. I did a little brief survey here. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring my glasses, so reading my survey is going to be a little challenging. But the Sac City Board of Supervisors, they meet at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. The Sac City Council meets at 5 p.m. Placer Board of Supervisors, they meet at 9 a.m. 2 days out of the month. Placer City Council meets at 5 p.m. Our Fire Board meets at 6 o'clock. Our CSD meets at 6 p.m. If there's an interest in further and greater engagement of the public in these meetings, it might be important to look at when is the public available to participate with those who govern us. And I don't govern us. And I don't know if 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. and on in the morning is the best time to reach most of those who are governed. So I think our board anyway could consider how that happens. And is that the best time, or is that the best and most convenient time for staff? So I raise those issues. They can be easily talked about. And one of my notes I finally made to myself are the meetings for those who govern or for those who are governed. And I know those who govern us need time to have decisions made in public. But at the same time, how do you get participation? How do you get engagement? That's the critical issue. These bills will play with that to some degree. One of the bills does make probably a needed assessment of how to deal with those who would substantially impair or disrupt meetings. And that's something that those who are governed and those who are governing need to be able to address.
Thank you. And I know the thing that a lot of boards have dealt with throughout the state, whether it's county boards of supervisors or city councils or town councils or whatever is the civility part, because some people just want to come and express themselves and never stop. And they tend to get into areas of foul language and other things because of their severe frustration. And so that's the part that concerns me, is we need to be able to have positive discussions. And it's okay to disagree with things, but we shouldn't get into name calling, accusations, pointing at staff members and making, those types of claims that aren't substantiated by hard facts. And that's where we've gotten to with a lot of the disruptions that have happened at our board meetings. We had one just recently that involved a school situation, right? And the parents were very upset because of masking provision. The county has nothing to do with that. So we tried to listen and stuff, but we basically had to stop all that because of the language that was being used and the anger that was being expressed. And again, we were not the decision-making body for that. So somehow I hope that when we get past the COVID stuff, whenever that happens, and I don't think COVID's going to go away, but I think the severity of the impact on people will diminish over time. When we get back to that, I'm hoping that we can get back to more completely civil conversations and open dialogue and discussions, because ultimately when the board meets, Board of Supervisors, there's a limited amount of time to make decisions on things that are critical relative to contracts and other things. So you have to move through an agenda or you stop up the progress on things. So it is important for people to recognize that, but at the same token, we want to make sure we get as much public participation as is reasonable. So, and by that, I mean, we limit it to 3 minutes per person. I've seen some boards and stuff that have gone to less than that. You get 1 minute to make your comment. I don't know how you can make any kind of a comment in 1 minute, but they're doing that to try to manage the time to do the work that has to be done that they're obligated to do by their oath of office, what it really comes down to. So it's a balancing act, and it's extremely difficult to do. It's been, COVID brought on a lot of things that took us out of the normal realm. I'm just hoping we can get back to something more normal and people can be considerate of one another and patient and have everybody has a chance to express themselves and understand the points that are being made, but not with the almost physical engagement, because that's what it kind of comes down to. When those meetings break down from a verbal perspective, then you wonder about what happens from the standpoint of actions that may occur because somebody's so mad they decide to take it out on somebody. That we don't want to see happen in any kind of a public meeting. So the legislation, from my view, is interesting. I hope personally that none of it gets passed the way it is, because I think it's not well written. But it is one of the things the state has the right to do. And if they flow that down to our agencies like SB 35 or something on housing, and we're just an administrative function at that point, because we're ministerial, basically. We have no ability to make our own choices or decisions. So I don't know how it's going to end up, but unfortunately, we're faced with that. So thank you for your report. Appreciate that. So any questions or comments for Richard on that particular aspect of it? Tim.
I think one of the things to consider time, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. APAC, we recently decided to start earlier because people were complaining that our meetings were taking, depending on what subject but they were taking up to 3 hours. 10 o'clock, it might end, frequently ending at 9 or 9:30. And people said we start earlier because that late start, they were getting home too late. And of course, they have to get up early with kids to school, getting on to work, whether they even had to commute to Sacramento or whether they could just move from the kitchen to the front room or something so they could work from home. And I think the first question I asked Supervisor Heidel, then chairman of the fire department 7 years ago, was why don't we start the meetings later? Because if you started them at 7 o'clock rather than at 6, you might get more people to come. Well, the fire department had experimented with a number of different starting times over the 20, 30 years John had been on the board. And with that trial and error, 6 seemed to be the most appropriate time. But as you know, hopefully with most of the agencies now doing Zoom, people do have a choice. They can either come in face to face, and I think that is important because you read body language, you read facial expressions, which you can't do on a Zoom. But people who need to stay home or want to stay home. They don't want to drive at night. They don't want to drive when it's cold or it's wet. They have other things, or doing two things at once. They can at least participate, and as we saw here tonight, they can come in and ask questions.
I agree, and we didn't need legislation to do so.
But COVID forced the issue that many of the agencies reacted to that and adopted it.
But I'm just saying, agencies can do that on their own without the people down the hill and the white collar down there making more rules. It's always the little addendums to the little rules that start.
I think there was a provision under the emergency powers of the governor for public meetings when it started, but we've now seen that it's usable, functional. Agencies can use them, right? They leverage them, take advantage of them, make it a benefit for the community, because I see more participation. But yeah, you're right. Now, if that's an emergency power only, then perhaps this legislation might be a little too.
I don't think it is emergency power. I mean,
I know that when you started having your board meetings virtually, you had to wait for the state to tell you could do it. Public meeting laws,
that was under the governor's control. This is legislation which is separate from the governor.
Yeah.
Ultimately has to sign a bill.
Yeah. So that enabled it to begin with. We've seen the utility of it. Hopefully this isn't so diffuse and so far spread that it becomes encumbersome and it has a negative impact. I'm hoping that, like as John said, that it gets changed if they pass anything, that it's effective and directed, right? So that it enables to, because Dick goes to so many meetings and attends so many things. Here's somebody in the community that's eager to be involved and knows the times. Not everybody knows that. Somebody like our Bridalwood residents tonight, they don't know about it until it's posted. They hear about it. It's an issue for them. Then now they're going to get caught up. Hey, when is that meeting? When does it happen? How is it noticed? Can I talk? I think it's the amount of outreach that we do with either our agencies at the county level, our special districts. Engagement's hard. It really is. And to Tim's point, we rolled our meeting times back to 6:30 from 7. We still have a good participation, but I've heard other people saying 6:30 is too early. Well, okay, well, there's a middle ground somewhere that we're just trying to make it, because we want that. We want the participation. So, so
with the Board of Supervisors, I'll just comment that we have typically 3 meetings a month. Sometimes we have 4, depending upon the amount of work that needs to be handled. And we have meetings that start at 9 a.m. that may not end until 7 p.m. So if you were trying to do that in an evening type of format, you would be either very, very late into the early morning, which nobody's going to want to participate in, or you'd have to break it into more meetings, right? So because there's a certain volume of things you have to get through, and a lot of it's on consent calendar, and which was set up specifically to be able to address that, because we don't think it's highly controversial items. It's annual type renewals of contracts, et cetera, that goes on the consent calendar primarily. But even at that, we'll have the public want to pull things off consent calendar, which is their right to request. Supervisor has to pull it off for discussion. But in and of itself, that can add another 45 minutes to any given discussion that you weren't anticipating, neither was staff. So trying to manage and balance the timelines associated between staff's commitments and everything else. What was arrived at a long time ago is a 9 a.m. start. Seems to be the best for the county to be able to finish most of the work they have to done typically by 5 o'clock, but sometimes closed sessions go beyond that, but the public's not involved with those. We actually looked at an 8 o'clock, and that didn't work well from the standpoint of participation from South Lake Tahoe, because if they're trying to drive down to attend a meeting and get out of Zoom and the inclement weather and ice on the road, and it's not a good situation for that South Tahoe supervisor to try to to travel during those conditions. So 9 o'clock kind of became the standard. The thing I've heard most on Board of Supervisor comments is the open forum part, which is essentially like our public comments. Most people would like that to be early on in the meeting. The board moved it to 1 p.m. because that's a time frame we generally can control pretty specifically. And if we start with the meeting with open forum early on in the morning, then we have all the staff that's stacked up to come in and present, and all that just gets deferred. And so it really does affect the flow and the management of resources to get people in to report. So it's much more indeterminate at that point, because we try to deal with the things that we think are going to be more controversial early, but typically the last thing on the agenda on a time specific basis. The time allocation is what's probably going to be the most controversial. It's just the way you organize it to make it work better. So all valid comments. And I imagine every agency kind of goes through that, trying to determine what's the best balance of things. So, okay.
One thing I compliment Mr. Ross, you are very good at attending meetings and being present there. And we've all,
yes,
we all attend various meetings. You're always there. I think it's pretty amazing. And I wonder, how do you get more engagement from your younger generation of folks? You know, that is from the high school, to get that engagement in that group, not just on controversial topics where there's a need that hits them, but just to get them regularly involved. And I think that's an interesting question, almost to ask our school system. How do you motivate that to occur? But to your credit, I mean, you're everywhere.
Even the middle generation. Not the younger generation.
Exactly. I mean, and I'm hoping Zoom is that platform. I know our meetings, look at the attendance we have with the hybrid, it's helping. Maybe that just is it.
One way to do it, I know, is AP Government in high school. Yeah. You require all the kids in the AP Government class to go to a public meeting. And we've had people attend the fire board meetings. We have people attend, youth attend the Board of Supervisors meetings or something like that. And that's a good way to get the engagement because they're learning about government, and local government's a major part of, any given community. So I thought that was a great idea. And so we do see some of that, but not a lot. I've never seen a person come back twice, successive meetings, even over a period of time. They come one to get the credit.
When they figure out government, please let me know.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on then. Healthy communities. I just want to update on everybody. I was just looking to see if Cindy had sent out the agenda for our meeting a week from today, March 14th, and I didn't see where it had been distributed yet. She was concerned with people getting confused with tonight's meeting, if there's 2 meetings out there in a row. So hopefully it'll be going out quickly. But I just want to cover the basic steps here. We're going to have some introductory remarks on the second Healthy Communities Forum, and the primary focus there is to look at mental illness in El Dorado Hills and El Dorado County. And with new state funding that's available, I'm going to kind of summarize what that funding is what I understand it to be, and what the governor is addressing in terms of new capabilities, facilities, whatever, in terms of how that funding for mental illness will be brought into the system on top of everything else that's there. We have Jennifer and Sophie Yoder who are going to do some descriptions of some of the mental health services they've used in the county and some of the difficulties of getting full services because they had to go out of county to Sacramento County to get the services when El Dorado County couldn't provide the level of service. So that's a important part. Dr. Josh Elder will talk about his experiences with mental illness again, particularly since he's an ER doctor. Stephanie McGann Jansen will do some discussion about grant funding metrics and how those are administered. Angie Platt, who is our new leader for Healthy Communities, will hopefully be doing a discussion about collaboration with the Upper Room in helping assess mental illness needs of the homeless. So a homeless focus, and we've heard about the Upper Room. And then Diane Rabinowitz, who's the president of the El Dorado County chapter of National Alliance for Mental Illness, i.e. NAMI, will be a guest speaker and talk about the needed continuum of care and some of the proposed solutions that NAMI has. And then wrapping up in terms of the presentations will be Dr. Martin Entwistle, who's with Marshall Hospital. He's the Associate Chief Medical Officer and VP of Population Health and Ancillary Services. And he'll speak about the services that Marshall offers and the unmet needs. So again, that forum will discuss, here's what we have in El Dorado County, here's our opportunity, and we need to encourage everyone in the community who knows of someone who may be struggling with mental illness to encourage them to get in contact, get the right kind of services. Because again, this is a prevention thing as much as it is addressing existing conditions. And we know there's been a lot of special stress, I'll call it unusual stress put on our youth in particular, but also a lot of adults with respect to what's happened with COVID and related things at school. So I'm looking forward to being able to share that information, and there will be questions and answers as well. But that's what's in line for that special meeting. Again, here starting at 5 p.m. 1 week from today. And again, we thank the fire department for hosting us for that particular part of it. And hopefully we'll be able to get some ongoing dialogue amongst community members of how we can do this better, how we can communicate with people. That's the outreach part, right? How do you engage people, right? So any questions on that? For those of you who are on an email list, you should be getting the meeting announcement with the agenda I just summarized very soon here. Move on to APAC. You're meeting this Wednesday, right?
No, we're not.
Oh, okay.
Our March meeting, we elected to cancel it. There's simply not enough new development that merits having a meeting to get people out. Last month, we did talk to Rafael Martinez from the Department of Transportation, and Rafael's generous with his time when it comes to discussing traffic impacts in El Dorado Hills. We had a special meeting with the department back in, I want to say September, focused on Saratoga Way. And then Saratoga was part of the conversation last month as well. But just basically some of the conceptual ideas of what's coming in terms of improvements in the county, and why when you ask for a stop sign, you don't get a stop sign. Why you ask for a left turn pocket, you don't get a left turn pocket. I'll keep asking for a left turn pocket. But you know, there are specific things that the Department of Transportation, the Transportation Department, you have to meet specific conditions in conjunction with the state, not just what we want to do. Municipalities, like cities, seem to have a little more leeway or a little more leverage. The county's a little different, but Rafael was very generous with his time. He talked to us at length. And then we did hear from a potential new project. A local resident, Inland Surf Company, was looking at, he's endeavoring to build an El Dorado Hills surf park. It's a unique project, and it was a good conversation to have, and it's still very conceptual right now. If you'd like to hear that conversation, it's at the end of our meeting, and it's all our meetings are posted on our YouTube channel and on our website, so you can go there and look at that. Next month, our meeting will be on April 13th. It'll be at 6:30 p.m. We'll be making a reservation for this room. Thank you to the fire department, as always. It will also be streaming via Zoom. What we're going to be looking at, I'm imagining, is that since the Central El Dorado Hills Specific Land Project is coming back to the Planning Commission at some date in April, our meeting would be the day before the first Planning Commission meeting, if that does happen. So we don't know what sort of documents will be available for us to review. We don't know what's changed with the project. And if we are to know, we're going to have about 2 weeks to see it. We're not going to, be 2 weeks, it'll be on Legislar. We'll share the documents with everybody, but our challenge is always that it's not a very informed conversation from our perspective if we don't have the documents sooner than 2 weeks before the meeting. And then again, the follow-up meeting would be at the end of April, hopefully for Commissioner Vegna here that they can get that on track. And you know, there's a lot of interest in the project, and we have provided our feedback on it in terms of we don't support that. We don't think there's enough benefit. It's a discretionary project. It's a loss of recreationally zoned property. It's private property, but it's a loss of that. So our concern was that we didn't see the benefit that would justify granting that trade-off. We've, in the meantime, after we've made that, and that's still our recommendation based off of what we know right now today. We've had community members that have long experience in the development business, land development, that we've had consultations with, and he's examined sort of the numbers of this, of what it looked like. You know, he tried to buy property here in El Dorado Hills to do that, and he's retired now. But when he looked at it, his findings sort of support what we had talked about. His are very granular in detail with some assumptions. Ours are based off of what was presented in the supporting documentation. But he's looking at like $60 to $80 million of benefit to the county, whereas El Dorado Hills, we might see maybe 20 million. So again, that was our concern, that we weren't seeing that equity in terms of, is it justified to support a project and rezone? And so there are a lot of people, a lot of opinions about this, and I know that there are opinions that are definitely no way, but something eventually is going to happen with that property, whether it's 20 years, 50 years, 10 years, or 5 years. We want to have a thoughtful conversation about it, make informed decisions so that it benefits the community. And if a project's approved, then it's something that benefits the developer, that develops us here in El Dorado Hills as residents, and that the impacts are mitigated. So
I will talk to Rob Peters to see about getting that agenda, the first agenda, posted as soon as possible.
I'm missing some emails back. So
pardon me?
I've had several emails in, but I have not gotten anything back.
Okay, well, I'll follow up with Rob on that.
All right.
So, yep. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and that's it. So we hope to see everybody here next month. Hopefully we have enough time with the documents that we could talk intelligently about it, and not from, as we discussed earlier, from a place of passion and shouting. So I hope to see everybody here for that.
Your meeting is April 13th, and I think potentially the first planning commission meeting is April 14th.
The day after. And then the next one will be the 28th.
Okay.
Well, as I said earlier, it could shift 2 weeks.
It might be later, yeah.
For the informational meeting to be at the end of the month, the 28th or whatever it is, and then the first meeting in May to deliberate. So we'll see.
Questions or comments for John on APAC?
Oh no, Chief.
I guess for all, both, perhaps EDH Fire could talk with APAC about the impacts and effects of speed humps, and those kind of things as part of development. And then I don't know, same conversation. We're getting significant, several requests for speed bumps, traffic calming devices, and existing neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
And the chief was very generous last May in the Bass Lake Villages. We got a lot of traffic concerns. I think we had 4 or 5 big accidents in about 3 months inside our neighborhoods, not on the roads on Bass Lake Road or around there. And the department, the transportation department, was very generous sending staff out to talk to us. We had about 60 people outside COVID, and we streamed the meeting. We had another 60 people online watching. It's not 60. Yeah. Anyways, about 80 people total. But Chief was very generous with time. Staff was there with them and had a very good talk and discussion about what the impacts are for some of the traffic calming devices for the fire department, and why, when we're developing things here in our community, why some things we can do and some things we cannot, and how it impacts the fire service, how it impacts the transportation department. We also had CHP for that too. So a good discussion, and I would love to have that discussion again. We'll just have to make sure the time's right for you.
Very good. And likewise with the community council, we'll get some things scheduled. So I'm going to move on then to community information and outreach. Cindy has been on vacation for a while here, so we'll include the distribution item she has in the email we send out. So you'll get that via the minutes of the meeting. Moving on to item 6, just reminder to everybody, our next meeting is Monday, April the 4th, again back here. Our guest speakers are actually going to have 3 guest speakers, all from Public Health Services. Olivia Byron Cooper, who is the director of that, and then Kristen Becker and Christy White. And so they're going to give you an overview of what the public health services are. And we're not going to get into mental health. This is physical health type things. And then identify some of their near-term initiatives, because they have several things going there, including efforts to try to minimize tobacco smoke, and then also vaping across the county. So hopefully people will be interested in that. And then in May, Chief, if the timing seems good, we could certainly have you come back and talk about the speed bumps. Pardon? Okay. So let me see if I can't pull up the meeting date in May here real quick. That's got to be May the 2nd, unless we moved it. Nope, May 2nd. So May 2nd, Monday, May 2nd. So right, yeah.
They're voting here.
Voting here.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the other thing we're changing in our calendar, is the June meeting has been moved back 1 week because of voting that will occur in that June primary. And so we will be meeting, June 13th instead of June 6th. So thank you for that. So we'll notify everybody on that, and when we get closer to it, we'll send out the reminder as well. And with that, does anybody have any go backs? Anything you absolutely need to put on the table here? And again, Zach, thank you for attending. Appreciate anybody from the county who comes down and helps us understand what's going on with planning and stuff is much appreciated. So thank you for taking the time and coming down for that. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:29.
I am fatigued.
And we started at 5, so let's do it.